Greetings, mathematicians. Today we're going to start with a what is the same and what is different. Pause and go over which is the same and what is different about A and B. Our learning target for today is I can use expanded and word form to identify decimals. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 on how well you think you can do that. So today there's a few new vocabulary words. We're going to review decimal from yesterday. Remember, that's a number that uses a decimal point and place value to show magnitude or size. Whenever we think about decimals, we want to think about that decimal point, and we want to think about place value, ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, and then to the right of the decimal point, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and so on. Sometimes we write decimals and other numbers in standard form or standard notation, and that just means a way of writing numbers using only digits. And this is the form that we use most often, where we just use digits. So if we looked at this number, 317 and 29 hundredths, that would be written in standard form, digits and commas and decimal points. Another way we can write numbers is in expanded form. So I think about what expanded means, to get bigger. So it's a way of writing numbers to show the value of each digit. So now we're going to take it a step further. Instead of just writing the digits in standard form like we talked about last, we're going to show what does that 3 stand for. Well, the 3 is in the hundreds place, so it stands for 300. The 1 is in the tens place, so it's worth 10. The 7 is in the ones place, so it's worth 7. The 2 is in the tenths, so it's worth 2 tenths. And finally, the 9 is in the hundredths, so we have 9 hundredths. So when we write it in expanded form, we show the value of each of those digits. Another way we can write a number is in word form, and this is the way people usually don't like to write it because you have to write a lot. A way of writing numbers using only words. So for example, 317 and 29 hundredths. So I would have my 317 and tells me I have my decimal point, 29 hundredths. In math, it's always important, but when we're talking about decimals and fractions, it's especially important that we use visual representations. And when I ask you to draw a visual representation in this unit, it's a way of writing a decimal number to show using base 10 blocks, okay? And in this example, we always use the whole 100 grid to represent one whole. So in this example, the whole is not all colored in, so that means it's a decimal. And what we talked about yesterday, how we can count the number of tenths and hundredths. But that would be, if we asked to make a visual representation of a decimal, that is what you would be doing, coloring in the parts of the hundred or the thousandth grid. Whenever you see decimals, I want you to stop and think about money, 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 money. Okay? Because we use decimals in money, that's how we use it most often. And if we think about the ones place being equal to $1, the tens place meaning $10, the hundreds place meaning $100, and then as we move to the decimals, we think about our tenths as our dimes, our hundredths as our pennies. It gives us a good reference, and it helps us see the relationship between the numbers. So we're going to review the different place values. We're going to start at our decimal point, and first we're going to do our whole numbers to the left. So to the left of the decimal place, our first place is our ones. Then we have our tens. Then we have our hundreds. Then we have our thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and then another comma, and then finally our millions. Okay, now we're going to move to the right. If we talk about smaller than one whole, again, we think money, money, money. When we think about decimals, we can think of our tenths. That's our dimes. We can think of our hundredths, our pennies. And we can think of our thousandths, a sliver of a penny. So I want you to talk to your table partner. What do you notice? What's happening as we move to the left and as we move to the right, looking at our place value chart? So we're going to do a quick recap of some of the things we talked about yesterday. We can have a 1, the digit 1, in a whole bunch of different places in a number, but the value comes from where it is. So in our first example up here, we have a 1 in the ones place, so it's worth 1 whole. Now we have our 1 in the tens place, so it's worth 10. And if we make a visual, we could think of $10. In our next example, we have a 1 again, but now it's in the hundreds place, so we could think of $100. And then final example, we think of 1,000. I could think of $1,000. So again, each time we're moving to the left, we're increasing by a multiple of 10. just like when we're talking about whole numbers, we can move to the right of the decimal point and see a pattern as well. So now I've got my 1 in my ones place. Again, I could picture that as my $1 bill. If I move over one place and now I have a 1 in my tenths place, I could picture that as 1/10 or 1 dime. In my next example, now I'm going to move my 1 into my hundredths place. I need a placeholder in my tenths, otherwise I would still say 1/10. Now I have it say 1/100th. Picture what that would look like in your head on the grid. Remember, that would be 1 out of 100 pieces. And finally, if I move my 1 to my thousandths place, now I could picture a grid with 1,000 pieces and just one of those colored in. So talk to your partner. What happens as we move from tenths to hundredths to thousandths, as we move to the right of the decimal point? Talk about it with your partner. So whenever you see a decimal, what should we think of? Everyone yell it out. We should think of money, money, money. Okay? So if you think of this chart, it will be helpful as you're talking about numbers, especially as we get really big numbers and really small numbers. I even have to write them out every single time and stop and think before I read them. It's not something you can do quickly because it's easy to make a silly mistake if you do. So now we're going to do some practicing. So get your whiteboards out or your paper if you're at home. We're going to write the next numbers in expanded form. Remember when we talked about expanded form, we're going to show the value of each digit. So I'm going to read the number and you're going to write it down in expanded form. 73 hundredths. So stop and think about it. I would start with my decimal point. 73 hundredths. I'm going to write it as a fraction first because to me that's the easiest way. 73 over 100. Now I can transfer it onto my chart. 73 hundredths. So that means I have put a 0 in front so that I know that it's 73 hundredths. Now I'm going to create. This is how I could write 73 hundredths. But remember, in this number, the 7 isn't worth just 7. It's worth 7 tenths. So I'm going to think of 7 tenths or 7 dimes, plus the 3 in this number is worth 3 hundredths. So I'm going to add my 3 hundredths to it. So if I was going to write this out, it would be 7 tenths plus 3 hundredths. That's how it would show expanded form. If I wanted to show it in fraction form, my 73 hundredths, I'm going to think about, well, I need a tenths and hundredths. In my tenths place, I have 7, so I'm going to say 7 1/10ths and 3 hundredths. And then I'm going to add them together because I was decomposing it into the two parts. Now I'm going to put them back together. So this would be my answer to writing it in expanded form using fractions. And this would be my expanded form using decimals. Let's try another one. Okay, so now we're going to look at our next answer. 605 thousandths. So I'm going to write it as a fraction first. To me, that's the easiest way. 605, then thousandths. So I need to write it over 1,000. Okay, now I'm going to transfer it onto my decimal chart. So I know I've got 6 tenths, no hundredths, and 5 thousandths. Now I'm just going to double check 0 and 605 thousandths. That works. So now I have to look, what is the 6 worth in this number? Well, the 6, okay, in this number, the 6 is in the tenths place, so it's worth 6 tenths. Plus, there's nothing in the hundredths place, no pennies in this one, so I'm not going to leave that one blank. And then 5 thousandths. So I need to make sure it's in the thousandths place. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths. I have to have 2 places with a 0 placeholders there. Otherwise, if I moved my 5 over, it would be a different value. So that's how I would write 605 thousandths out in expanded form as a decimal. If I wanted to write it in expanded form as a fraction, I'm going to say I have 6 1/10ths. That's what this is saying up here, 6 tenths, plus, I don't have to write any hundredths, and I'm going to say 5, oops, wrong way, 5 times, going back to decimal form, 5 times 1,000th, because again, I had nothing, a 0 in my hundredth spot. So 6 1/10ths plus 5 1,000ths would give me 605 thousandths. Okay, our next example, 45 thousandths. I want you to pause and try to write it out yourself, both as a fraction and a decimal, and then change it to expanded form for both. Then you can go ahead and press play to see if you got it right. So I'm going to start out with my 45 thousandths. Okay. Then I'm going to write it as a decimal. I got 0 ones. I have 0 tenths in this one, but I have 45. My 45 has to end in my thousandths place. So 0 and 45 thousandths. I could build it like this, but we know in the number, the 4 really stands for 4 hundredths, and the 5's value is 5 thousandths. And together, when I add them together, I get 45 thousandths. Okay, now we're going to look at how would I write it if I was talking about the same number, but now thinking of it as a fraction. Well, I don't have anything in the tenths place, so I don't have any tenths. I have 4 times 1/100th, so 4 hundredths. That's what this says up here too. 4 times 1/100th is 4 hundredths, plus 5 times tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 5 1,000ths. So both of these are the same thing, just written in 2 different ways. Now we're going to practice reading numbers to our partner. So again, your first job is to stop, find that reference point. Where's that decimal point? You read the numbers in front just like you would read any normal whole numbers. Then you're going to stop and say and then you're going to say the digits in this place, and then you're going to say whatever the last place value is that you stop at. So if we looked at this one, I'm going to say my first number, 36. So if I put it in here, 36 and 9 tenths. How I would write it is 36 decimal point 9, because that's what it's standing for. The 3 is in the tens place, so it's standing for 3 tens. The 6 is in the ones place, so it's standing for 6 ones. And the 9 is in the tenths place, so it's standing for 10 dimes or 90 cents. Okay, read this number to your partner, or if you're at home, read it to yourself or someone around you. How I'd say this number is 563 and, if I look down at my chart, 9. The 9 is in the hundredths place, so I'd say 9 hundredths. So 563 and 9 hundredths. Okay, go ahead. Try to read this one. Again, find your decimal point. Chunk it into pieces. It would be 4,236. And, now I'm going to say the numbers after the decimal, 805. And I read the last place, thousandths. 805 thousandths. So 4,236 and 805 thousandths. If you're up for a challenge, try to read this number. It might help if you see it in our chart. How I would say this number would be 6,034 and 170,589 millionths. That one's tricky. Now we're going to translate written form into standard form. So it's going to be written out for you in words, and you're going to translate it on your whiteboard, write it in standard form with using digits. So go ahead, 5 and 100th. Go ahead, write it, and then go back and double check and read it to yourself to make sure that you have everything in the right spot. If I look at my answer, I have 5. That's the thing before the and. My and means I have my decimal point. And then I'm going to say 100th. Well, that means the 1 has to be in that 100th place. So I need that 0 in that placeholder. Okay, our next one. Write it down. 11 and 5 hundredths. Write it down and then be sure you always go back and read it to yourself to make sure you didn't leave something out. So 11, I've got 110 and 1 in 11. Now I'm going to put my decimal point. I have a 0 again in my 10th spot and a 5 in my 100th spot. 11 and 5/100ths. Okay, the next one is 1 and 15/100ths. Go ahead and write it down on your board. This is what it would look like, 1 and 15/100. Our next one says 102 and 45/1000ths. Go ahead, read it again to yourself and write it on your whiteboard, and then again double check to make sure you didn't leave something out. I can see I have 102 and then I need it to say 45/1000ths. So I need the 5 to be in the thousandths place, so I need this 0 in my tenths place as a placeholder. So I want you to talk to your partner, talking about translating from written words into numerals, into standard form. Talk to your partner, what's the trickiest part, or what do you need to remember to do next time when you're doing this so that you don't make a mistake? So we're going to go back to our learning target. I can use expanded and word form to identify decimals. So think about where you are in the continuum. Are you at a 1 where you're not sure where to begin? 2, you kind of can get started but get stuck? Or could you teach this to the class? Remember to be at a 5. Every example you probably wrote exactly perfectly and didn't make any mistakes. And I would guess after 1 day of doing this, you're probably not at a 5 yet. So go ahead. Your teachers will tell you what your assignment is next. And if you're an at-home learner, check in your Google Classroom for what to do.